In this last tutorial video, we're going to create our graphical displays to show the relationship between two quantitative variables. And this graphical display is called a scatter plot. So we're going to plot one quantitative variable on the x-axis, one quantitative variable on the y-axis, and then observe the relationship that we see. So when we are creating these scatter plots, we do need to ensure that our independent variable is displayed on the x-axis and our dependent variable is displayed on the y-axis. And the way that you ensure that that always happens is to make sure that your independent variable is to the left of your dependent variable in your columns. So your worksheet has already been set up that way for you, but if you're doing this with a different set of data, that's how you make sure that that variable that you want on the y-axis shows up on the y-axis. It just needs to be in the rightmost column of your data selection. So we'll create this first scatter plot for living area and sale price, and then we'll repeat the process for fireplaces. Now I will caution you, the fireplace scatter plot will look a little funny because we only have 4 discrete values that are being represented by fireplace. So it's going to kind of look like 4 straight lines going upward in the graph. So to create this first scatter plot, we're going to select the 2 variables that we want to appear. So when I do make these selections, I'm going to click on the column letter. So column B to highlight living area 1 time, and then I'm going to hold Control or Command, depending on my operating system, and click on column letter D 1 time. Very important to make sure that you don't double click or you'll be double selecting something in Excel and it won't like it. So after I've selected those columns, again by just clicking on column letter B, holding down Control or Command and clicking on column letter D, then I'm going to go to my Insert Tool ribbon where I have inserted all my graphs throughout the course so far. So we're going to go to our Charts panel, and the chart that we're looking for is this scatter plot right here, this Insert Scatter XY chart. And we're going to select the very first option for that flat 2D scatter plot without any lines. Okay, so I'm going to drag this visualization to right below my table, maybe make it a little bigger. And then we need to add some other features to our scatter plot. We definitely need axis titles. We're going to add a trend line, and we're also going to add our R-squared value and a nice descriptive title. So we can start with the title. This is our scatter plot relationship of living area and sale price. And this is one of those that we're going to add. N equals 1,521 for our sample size, and stop there. So to add those chart elements, again, if you have this green plus sign, you can add them that way. Otherwise, you'll need to come to your chart design ribbon and select your chart elements from the list here. So we're going to add axis titles. We'll have both of them. We're also going to add a trend line. Okay, and we just want this linear trend line, so we can check that box, and by default it will be linear. This axis here on the bottom is our living area variable, and because it does have measurement units, we'll put those measurement units in parentheses after the variable name. And here this is, our sale price variable. Make sure we use proper capitalization for these names. Goodness gracious, here we are. All right, US dollars. Alrighty. The next thing that we're going to do is we'll certainly format the numbers here as dollars, just like we did with our side-by-side box plots. Another thing we do want to make sure is that this interior plotting space is a square, so I'm just going to drag this down a little bit until the little grids inside resemble more of a square. Okay, and that's because we have these 2 variables are on different scales. This goes from 0 to 3,500, and this goes from 0 to 600,000. Making sure that our plotting space is a square allows us to kind of see what these things would look like if they were on a similar scale. So that's the reason why we want this interior plotting space to be a square. Okay, So we have our scatter plot, we have our titles. I'm going to double click on this y-axis over here, and when I do that, I'll get my number panel that pops up. I want to format these numbers. Okay, so I'll click that number drop down, click on General. Well, if you're on a Mac, it'll say Link to Source, and change it to currency, and also round those decimal places to 0. Okay, so that just really makes it clear what we're looking at here. The other thing that we're going to do is format this trend line. It's blue and it's dotted and it kind of disappears behind these dots. So I'm going to click on my trend line and just see what my options are. So if I click on my trend line, I should see a bubble here at the left side and here at the right side, and then my Format Trend Line panel should pop up here on the right side. So we definitely want it to be a linear trend line. Okay, the other thing that we want to do is enable this R squared value on the chart. So we'll click that. Click that box. For some reason, it's not clicking for me. Oh, let me go back. I think my computer froze up for a second. Well, let's kind of move this around and see if we can actually do something with this. Okay, there we go. It's finally working. So I get this little R squared value that appears on the chart. I'll just pull it over here to the right side and maybe bold it and draw some attention to it with a different color. Okay, so we see that R squared value, and then I'm also going to format this trend line. So if I click on the trend line, then I'll have my trend line options that appear over here. If I click on this paint bucket, then I can control what it looks like. So I want this line to be a solid line. Okay, I want the dash type to be solid. And then maybe I want to change the color to a color that's going to stand out a little bit more on top of the chart. So this lets us know kind of the direction of the relationship. It's positive, and that's why we see a positive correlation up here. Okay, and it also, what this is telling us is that as we increase the living area of the house, that the sale price is also increasing on average. Now there are some issues with this chart that we'll talk about in a later lecture. We don't really like to see these fanning patterns, this unequal variance through the graph, but we do have ways of helping control that in our data transformation lecture. So right now we'll just assess it for as it is, and then if we need to correct the data, we'll do that before we model it. So I'm going to click in my chart, and this is where you can play around with some formatting. Totally up to you. If you don't add any of this extra shading, that's fine. Just whatever works for you to look the cleanest and display the information the best. Okay, just make sure that whatever color choices you're using, if you have a theme, that you're keeping it consistent throughout. So the next one, we're going to create the scatter plot for our fireplace variable. You're going to see it looks kind of funny. If we look at the correlation here, we can see that this isn't a super strong relationship between fireplaces and sale price, but it's not non-existent. There is a relationship there. It's just more of a moderate to weak relationship because it's between 0 and 1, not close to 1. All right, so to create the scatter plot, we're going to select those two columns for fireplace and sale price. We'll go to our insert tool ribbon. We'll go to our scatter plot tool here from our charts panel, select that first option, and then we'll drag it over here, and we'll try to keep it the same size as our other plots, so everything looks nice and consistent. Okay, we can add our axis titles, trend line, and then we'll do some of our other formatting as well. So this is number of fireplaces. This is the sale price in US dollars. This is scatter plot relationship of fireplaces and sale price. Put that sample size there in our title. Okay, we'll format this axis as currency. So click on the axis, the actual numbers. We can come here, change the number formatting to currency, round it to 0 decimal places. Starting to look much better. Maybe we can pull that out a little bit more so it's consistent with the other one. We'll do the same type of shading to keep all of our visualizations consistent. If we click on that trend line and come over here to our trend line options, we can enable that R squared value on the chart. Once we're clicked in it, we can format it. Okay, so not as strong of an R squared value. We'll interpret that value actually in the lab slide deck, so make sure that you do go look at that interpretation practice and that you practice it with each of these variables so that you know how to do that process for your homework. Okay, we can call some attention to these labels. We can format this trend line, have it red, make sure that we do that solid line type so it's very clear. We see this positive relationship, which is why our correlation value is positive. The other thing that we might want to do is format this so that it does go in whole numbers. So maybe we would just go from 0 to 3, and these major ones go by a whole step. Okay, so now that bottom axis makes sense according to how the data is being displayed, and we can, again, adjust the size of it so that that interior plotting space is a square. All right, so this Scatterplot is ready to go in your report, and then the next step is to interpret what you see in these visualizations and communicate the analysis.